Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about the month of October. And I have to say, this month begins on a very somber note because of all the tragedy that's been going on. September brought so much sadness, and October will be bringing us a bit of relief. I have a lot to talk about with this month because this is, and I want to say, a turning point. And as you are well aware, I particularly use the wording turning point just like Charlie Kirk did. That's the name of his organization, because really, little did we know, all of this is exactly that, a turning point. The world is changing, and it's changing rapidly. You're going to see over the course of the next year, nothing is going to be the same. There is a level of awareness that's changing, and there's no going back. So let me talk about what I see happening. Now, we have to admit that this just can't go on. All this violence, all these attacks on world leaders and on ideas, the ideas that are so, people need to be able to express themselves without violence. But I have to say this, it is so uncanny how what's occurring now is so much like the 1960s. It's been said by many people, but I know there's an astrological reason why. You see, the 1960s were a time of revolutionary change. I grew up in the 60s. I was there. I felt the energy. I know what was going on. And there were so many assassinations. The assassination of President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, as well as Bobby Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. And this time period was all about revolts and change of the status quo of the way things were. Things had to change, and the people fought back against the government's rules, especially the younger generation. Now I think it's the younger generation that's going to wake up and start to change, because they don't like what's going on, nor did we in the 60s. And you see, here is the astrological rhyme and reason. Back in the 1960s, we had the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And I know I'm a Vedic astrologer. I use the outer planets, but in a different way, in a different context that most Western astrologers don't perceive as much as I do. Because the outer planets are the planets that aren't visible to the naked eye. Therefore, they don't particularly rule our physical being as the planets that we can see do. The outer planets are more about the collective unconsciousness of humanity. Therefore, when they make aspects to one another, they actually change the collective unconsciousness. They have a huge effect on generations of people because they move so slow and stay in a sign for so long. So the entire 1960s had the Uranus and Pluto conjunction. And Uranus is the planet that deals with major change, revolution, unanticipated changes, the things that you don't prepare for. It happens suddenly and unexpectedly. And that's definitely what will be happening, because as they were conjunct, and actually it was 1966 that they came together and exactly made their conjunction around 22 to 24 degrees of Leo. Leo deals with rulership, and that's what the revolutionary change entailed. But here's what's so interesting to me. To really study astrology and look at these degree markings and what they represent in the zodiac is so telling, because the Sun and Ketu came together exactly on September 10th, the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The Sun represents leadership, rulers, kings, presidents. And Ketu is losses. And I made that statement for that day because this is what it means astrologically: loss of a leader. But here is what is so bizarre. Now, being in Leo, Leo is the sign of kings and leaders on top of it. So this was something, and I absolutely said it would be political. And this has turned into a huge political extreme. But here's what I'm finding interesting, relating this back to the 1960s, where Uranus and Pluto came together between 22 and 24 degrees of Leo. This was exactly where the Sun Ketu came together, at 23, 24 degrees of Leo. This is so relative. So what you're going to see is something similar as what happened in the 60s. That whole time span really came down to a day in September of 2025, when the Sun Ketu exactly conjoined at 22, 24 degrees. It was actually 23, 24 degrees exactly in Leo. And as I say, and I say this, and I said this in a way that was prophetic in my video, that this day would be a turning point. And it is. It most certainly is. The divine is working through the events and the people and everything on earth to wake us up. So currently, here is why I'm looking at the transits of Uranus and Pluto. Because currently, and exactly right now, they are in aspect to each other. They're in a perfect trine, where Pluto is 7 degrees of Capricorn and Uranus is 7 degrees of Taurus. Now remember, I am a Vedic sidereal astrologer, and these are the true placements of where the planets are astronomically. And I'm going to do a whole video on this for those of you that don't understand what I'm talking about, with that these are the true placements of where the planets are, the sidereal placements according to the stars. And astrology is that. It's in accordance to the stars. So if we look at the trinal aspect, you might say, well, we don't look at the outer planets or the trines in Vedic astrology. But that's where you're wrong, because all of the planets are constantly aspecting one another by their degree how they are by degrees from each other. And what I call that is their spatial relationships. And we don't just look at planets in terms of the Vedic full aspects. We look at all the planets in relationship to each other. Do you really think the ancients just looked at special aspects? They looked at the heavens and saw the alignments of the planets. That's what astrology is. So the trine aspect, for those of you that want to better understand astrology, when planets are in a trine, and actually every 40-degree segments from each other, the trine is simply where you take 40 degrees times 3 and equals the trine. But actually in Western astrology, it's actually called a novile, which is 40 degrees. But every 40 degrees, when they're exact, they're conjunct in the Navamsha, the D9 chart in Vedic astrology. That is the most important divisional chart that represents the deep connection of the planets. So while Uranus and Pluto are in this trine, they are conjunct in the D9 Navamsha chart, which means they're connected. That's basically what I want you to understand, just like they were when they were conjunct in the 60s. That's why we have all of this revolutionary change. Yes, I talked about Uranus representing the unconventional transitions, change. Uranus is the planet of change, but it's also called the planet, the Great Awakener. And it's awakening us. Now, with its aspect to Pluto, what does Pluto represent? Pluto represents major transformations. It's actually a planet of death. It is everything that the 8th house is in astrology, which rules death. Deep, dark things of the underworld, of the world beyond this world. That's what it deals with. And so what I'm getting at with all that I'm talking about is that Pluto, well, let me explain a little bit about Pluto for those of you that are new to all of this. People really do fear Pluto. And here's another thing that's about to happen. Pluto is about to turn direct. When a planet is on its way to change its position, in other words, when it goes from retrograde to direct or direct to retrograde, it's changing its direction. And in that process, it pretty much stands still. And when a planet does station, either stationary, direct, or retrograde, that planet becomes prominent in everything that it represents. So on top of this aspect with Uranus, Pluto is stationing, and October 3rd, it turns direct. So it's standing still at this 7-degree mark of Capricorn. And it's going to bring out all of Pluto's qualities. And here is the most important thing for everyone to understand about Pluto, because Pluto aspects are, when they occur in your birth chart, Pluto aspecting a personal planet, it's painful. It's gut-wrenching. It's emotional. You cry, you hurt, and let me explain what it's doing. Pluto takes away things in our life that we feel like we can't live without. And in the process of this happening, yes, you go through major loss, and it's gut-wrenching. But 2 years later, I found this to always be true. After letting go of that which you feel like you can't live without, you look back and you think, oh my God, thank God that happened, because I couldn't be who and what I am today. So Pluto always eliminates that which is not growth producing. because we always must grow. That is what's basically happening to almost everyone on the planet right now in terms of humanity. And that's what the Uranus-Pluto aspect is causing and disrupting in our life currently. Not only the loss of people being murdered or assassinated, but a particular loss in our life that we have to let go of in order to grow. And that's what's happening right now. And you know that sometimes people have a big plan to come down and fulfill like a life plan that helps and changes humanity. You can think of that in terms of President Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., as well as Robert Kennedy, and even when I think back to John Lennon, Jesus. There are such important messages and lessons from these big karmic cycles of humanity. And Charlie Kirk is no different. This is his mission. And whether you agreed with what he said or not, you have to respect that he followed his truth. He lived his truth. What he taught, he practiced. And I think anyone that follows their truth, I have to say I admire them. This is a great awakening. And let me just say, coming around throughout this year, there's going to be more. And if people don't wake up, there's probably going to be some more assassinations. People have got to change and wake up. It's not about whether you agree with someone, but it's about really healing the planet. And what I think this boils down to is what Erica Kirk in her inspiring talk said. And I thought her speech was so inspiring for women. And I'll tell you why, whether you agree or anything with the both of them. Here is what I think is the most powerful message from all of this. That love is what heals. And that yes, we should be honor marriage and love our spouses with all of our heart, and our children and family is the most important aspect of our lives that we should love and honor. And if you disagree with that, then we disagree. But that's the core essence of what I think we're here to learn and grow through, because when we connect and love, we heal. Love is the answer, and that's what this is going to teach us. Now, I'm going to go back to what I think this month is really going to teach us. This is the month of October. Because really, what I think's about to transpire and happen is going to be when Jupiter transits into the sign of Cancer. Sidereally, Jupiter will go into Cancer, where it is going to station and turn retrograde. So from October 18th to December 5th, Jupiter will touch foot into the sign of Cancer. And it will be 0 degrees, and by November, mid-November, it will turn retrograde. And by December 5th, it will go back into Gemini. But this is a sneak preview of what's to come during this time. And what do I say about Jupiter just touching its foot into Cancer during this time? It's going to give us the vision of what's to come. And Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, so it brings out all the good of what Jupiter's about, which is spirituality, which is truth, which is philosophy and higher-minded learnings and teachings and teachers. This is a beautiful thing. And Cancer is the sign of family. So what is this teaching us? The importance of family. This is truly what we need to get out of this. We're born together with families for a reason. We're here to learn through our family. We're here to love through our family and be that example. And I think the Kirks will agree with me on that. Although I know we probably disagree on some other things concerning astrology. I'm going to get there too. But looking at this, this is about, here's another thing, Jupiter being 0 degrees of Cancer. Some Vedic astrologers say when they're in early degrees of a sign, they're in their infancy and therefore weak. But I disagree with this one. Totally, because whenever a planet is in the first 0 degrees to 3 degrees 20 minutes of a cardinal sign, it is all powerful. Why? Because it's Virgotama, meaning in the divisional chart that I was referring to, the Navamsha, whenever a planet is in the same sign in the Navamsha as it is in the birth chart, that power, that planet picks up incredible power. So what are the cardinal signs? Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. So Jupiter in Cancer at 0 degrees is all powerful for bringing together family, spirituality, and love. That's how I see this. But by December 5th, we're going back to it being in Gemini. But let me give you a futuristic date. And I've talked about this before. When Jupiter goes into Cancer and stays there, it will be June 1st. And then again, by the time of July 22nd, we have an incredible configuration that will transform our planet. Mark my words today. But this time period in October will give us a glimpse of what's to come. So look at this and realize that there's going to be an amazing transformation that's about to unfold on our planet. Now, a few more things I want to talk about, yes, is the fact that, well, looking at, now I know I was talking about that time period of when K2 and the Sun came together, and it represented great loss. So there is another time that K2 and the Sun will come together in the sign of Leo. Now here is what's happening. Rahu and K2, Rahu the north node of the moon, K2 the south node of the moon, they stay in a sign for a year and a half. But it takes them 18 and a half years to go through all 12 of the signs. So in other words, it will be 18 and a half years from now that they will return to these signs that they're in right now. But they're here for 18 months, a year and a half. Now the Sun and K2 will come together 2 times before K2 leaves Leo, because it's within a year and a half. And I'm looking at August 22nd of 2026. Mark this day, because that is when Sun and K2 will return again. And this time it will be 5 degrees of Leo. So the nodes travel backwards. It just occurred at 23, 24 degrees of Leo. K2, that is, with the sun. And then they're going to move down to where they're going to be in the early part of Leo, 5 degrees. And this is conjunct the fixed star Regulus, which is the star of kings, leaders. And so what I am trying to say, if we don't get our act together and understand what the stars are trying to tell us, something unthinkable could happen again around that day. So I'm not going to go into that. Well, I'll be talking about that way later on in the next year. But this is heavy. And we have to wake up now. Enough is enough. The full moon will be October 6th. And this full moon will be in Pisces in the nakshatra Revati. And Pisces being the last sign of the zodiac, as well as the nakshatra Revati, is the last 27th nakshatra of the zodiac. Therefore, this deals with endings, completion before a new beginning. So this is really, really powerful and important to understand that this is leading us to a fresh new beginning. And Pisces does deal a lot with spirituality, but sometimes it can deal with lessons that deal with loss and endings, and that is what we're feeling through this full moon. But the new moon is going to be happening October 21st in Libra. It will be around 4 degrees of Libra. And this is all about bringing things to peace and justice. But what I did notice at the time of this new moon, there will be Mars exactly conjunct Mercury, which deals with Mercury's communications. Mars is anger. So there will be hostile exchanges of information and communications. And of course, Libra does deal with justice. Think about it. Its symbol is the balance, the scales. So things are being worked out right now to bring justice, but I don't think the rhetoric, as they say, is going to be toned down. People are angry. People are upset. And there's things brewing because of all of this. But here's another thing that I noticed, that this month of October, Mars and the Sun will start to be in the same sign. And this happens every 2 years, and they stay pretty much, whether they're in the one's in the beginning and one's at the end of the sign, and they come together within this period of time. It lasts for about 4 or 5 months that they're together in the same sign, but they will exactly conjunct January 7th at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. I'm talking about the Sun and Mars. And Mars is violence, Mars is war, Mars is attacks. And Sagittarius deals with justice. So you're going to find all these differences of opinions coming together in terms of what's just, what's fair, and retribution, and what justice will bring. This is going to be brewing and building, and by January 7th, we will see anger explode concerning what's been happening all the way starting from this time in October. But here's what I think we have to do, aside from our opinions politically or religiously, we have to look at the big picture. And the big picture involves humanity and transformation and change that all of this is bringing to all of us. And going back to what's going on, and I have to say, here's another thing. I know I've been talking about this particular planetary lineup that happens around the 24th, or happened on the 24th of September. I am doing this video before that date. And what I want you to know, this is a very difficult day for humanity. And when I make predictions about a particular day, sometimes it's not necessarily something that blows up in the world globally, but it affects all of us personally. And if you have any planets aligned with this alignment that I'm speaking of on the 24th of September, you'll feel it or something will happen. Just like something happened to Charlie Kirk on the day he was assassinated. Do you realize that transiting Mars was exactly on his sun on that day? Do you realize Mars rules war, violence, weapons, guns, knives, fire? It exactly conjoined his sun. This could have been prevented if people would wake up to what astrology's for. I don't want to be right about this type of stuff. I want it to not happen because we've used astrology to prevent things. That's the beauty of astrology, and that is what astrology should be used for. When you know the planets are difficult, heed them. Don't go out publicly and speak to a crowd where you could be a target. Yes, and I'm going to do a video on Charlie Kirk and show you his chart, exactly what was happening on that day. But I gotta say another thing. Bottom line, we need to start looking at the unity and how our differences are actually what probably we think are differences, but are actually all in the same thing. And this is my talk right now is going to be about religion versus spirituality versus astrology. Because here is what I am and what I believe. Now, the Kirks were very religious, and I see no problem in that. But I have been attacked my whole life by people that were religious zealots, where they say astrology is part of the devil, astrology is wrong, and it's evil. And they don't even know what it is. Astrology is a science. Oh, I know people say it's a pseudoscience. No, if you've worked with astrology as long as I have, you will know it works. And it is a beautiful tool given to us by the divine. We are simply watching the patterns in the sky of planets. These are all made by God. This is our divine connection with our universe, the planets, the stars, how we all relate. There is nothing evil or wrong with understanding this. That is astrology. And by the way, did you know that all the popes used to use it? And of course all the kings, and all of a sudden they're saying astrology. I haven't heard this so much lately though. Maybe I'm still talking about the attacks I used to get in the 1980s about astrology. Maybe they've come around with a better understanding of astrology, but the popes used to use it. And here's another thing about astrology. Throughout the Bible, and actually in all religious texts, they talk about the stars and the planets and their aligning. And, you know, when people say, thank your lucky stars, what are they talking about? Or when the stars align? They don't realize they're talking about astrology. But it's true, it is when they align in certain ways that either helps us or hurts us. We've got to use these cycles to help us live our lives better. This is so great that we have this gift. I believe the divine has given us astrology. And by the way, who were the three wise men? They were following the stars. And I'll tell you this about the three wise men. They were called the Magi. Magi means astrologer. And following the star to what? Give them the message of the king was being born. Oh my God, this is so beautiful. So my hope is that I can make astrology, particularly Vedic, mainstream, because it should be used to help people. And that's all. And what it really does is helps you understand who and what you really are. Know thyself. That's what the stars tell us. And that can help you in every way of life, understanding who you are, what your gifts are, what you're here to do. This is astrology. And I'm bringing this all up because I think religion and spirituality are actually one and the same, because what is the deeper essence of religion? Spirituality. What is spirituality? Connecting to the God, the divinity that's within all of us, and understanding how we are all connected and we are all one. That is what we must all know. That's what spirituality teaches. What's within. Religion is, in essence, that which is searching for God without. But really, I think religion does teach going within. So what I'm trying to say is religion and spirituality are one and the same. And I consider myself spiritual, not religious, because religious follows too many man-made rules, if I could say that. They say they're in the Bible, but hey, the Bible's been translated too many times for us to completely take it verbatim, like it's symbolic, and people get different representations. So the only reason why I'm bringing this up right now is I want people of religion and spirituality to unite and realize they are one. And I want people with different political views to understand that political views as well as religion all deals with the same thing, our beliefs. And if we could boil it down to one basic human belief that we should all respect, and that is, I think it's the love of our family, our partners, others. Because here is the bottom line, the takeaway from all of this is, aside from politics or religion, just love your family. And if you do this, it will be a much better world. Period. So with my message about Pluto, about astrology, about politics, let's come together and find our commonality of our basic core beliefs. And everyone believes love is the answer and love is what heals. So I will leave you at that. There is some amazing things that we're going to peer into and we're going to see with Jupiter going into Cancer. And I want you to get ready and be ready for the transformation of consciousness that is evolving and happening. And with that, if you want this in greater detail, I outlined this in great detail in my newsletter. Sign up for my newsletter. And I have a mission with that newsletter to awaken everyone. Go to galacticcenter.org, sign up for my free newsletter, and if you want to join me weekly talking about all of this in greater detail, go to my Patreon page. Become a member of our spiritual community. And don't forget, my galactic planner is exactly what we need to prevent things. Charlie Kirk could have known about this if he knew Mars was on his sun. It would have been in his galactic planner, I promise, because that is a huge aspect. Would not have been missed. And last but not least, so go to galacticplanner.com, sign up and get your planner for all of the planets and what they're doing in your personal chart daily. You could be in the know. And last but not least, if you want to study with me and become my student, learn astrology, go to my university website. You can join anytime. It's self-paced. Go to universityofvedicastrology.com. Thank you.